So, hello there, David. Great to see you.
Hey, good to see you, Jude.
Very good. So, for anyone who doesn't know, David Pallash and myself, David still works at Lego in basically looking at all the things to do with social responsibility. And I was working in Creative Play Lab, but I guess we shared this like tremendous connection on wanting to basically, we absolutely love Lego. That's a given, or we wouldn't have been there and still
Absolutely.
there. But we're also really excited about where to push things and see where we could take a loved brand and an incredible toy to the next level. So
Totally.
I don't want to try and describe what you do as it's truly epic, but could you take it away?
You put the pressure on me now. Wow, truly epic. I love that. I'm going to put that on my CV. I think the best way to describe what I do is create and strengthen global programs that look at learning through play and get learning through play effectively into the hands of children, no matter where they're from. We do that various ways. The other side of the coin that I'm involved in is building advocacy for play, both inside Lego and outside the Lego group. So what that means is basically making sure that as many people as possible understand why play is so important. And I think we're going to discuss a bit more about that later, but it is important, and I enjoy reminding people that.
It's one of those weird things, isn't it? It's like in design, we have certain phrases where you roll your eyes, like keep it simple, stupid, because the truth of the matter is it actually takes you a lifetime to unpack and unbox and be able to affect that in everything you do and touch and make and interact with. And I kind of feel like play is one of those words which we look at kids, they play, they're hardwired to play, the same as if you look at animals, they will just goof around and do stuff. And yet, I guess we're starting off with a bit of a tough question here, but what is it in your observation that really is the essence of play?
Blimey. Well, it's a question that we try and answer as often as possible. The essence of play is exploring, experimenting, failing, succeeding, communicating, iterating, critical thinking, problem solving, all of those things wrapped up into one. It's a very holistic method to develop lifelong learning skills. It's all of the above. I think it's such a powerful medium to engage with the world on, and through play. You mentioned animals earlier. We have this little thing called evolution that tends to get rid of things that we don't need, and one of the behaviors of most animal species that we're talking about here, they have kept play as part of their development, including us. So that's because they need it. We need it. We mustn't forget that. So that was a long answer to your very short question.
Yeah, and I think it's a great answer, but I feel it again. It's sort of those sort of pillars, as it were, of play. It sort of feels like it's that interesting thing. I remember it took me a long time to unbox learning through play. It sounds very easy just to quote and be like, oh yeah, learning through play, sure. But I guess, what has it meant for you as you've gone through your career? Because I'd imagine, when you first stepped in the company, it meant one thing, and now with all this year's experience, I'm sure that's become a lot more detailed in its meaning.
Oh, it has. It has. So just a bit of background. I was a teacher for many years out in Tokyo, Japan, teaching the children of expatriates in an international school. So tons of different countries. And we were a play-based school. We were all about creating a beautiful environment that children felt comfortable in and comfortable to explore through play the world around them. And it was a real privilege. Became head teacher there for a while too. And I really saw firsthand, my first experience of the power of play. It's an equal playing, it's an equal playing field when it comes to play. Everyone can do it. You hear people saying various things about being creative or this and that. Everyone can play. Creativity is part of that. Imagination is part of that. It's for me, we mustn't fall into the trap of thinking that it's one size fits all in the way we all learn, because it definitely isn't. You and I learn differently. The people listening to this all learn differently. But play offers the same experience for everyone, with many different outcomes, and that's the beautiful thing. So taking that into Lego after doing an MBA in the meantime, I suddenly had frameworks to put all of my practical experience to, and that's because I get to work closely with the Lego Foundation, and they have, if I may, just one framework they use, which is really useful to identify a quality learning through play experience. It has 5 different characteristics. You may remember these, Jude. One of them is joyful. It has to be joyful. You don't see kids playing when it's not joyful. I mean, they're not really learning through it. They might be playing for a bit, but they'll soon disengage. Joyful, meaningful, has to mean something to them. They have to be able to relate to it. We're still the same as adults. We still need that meaningfulness. What else is there? There's iteration, something I know you love, Jude. Being able to iterate on things, take it to the next level, making something better, changing it for the better, redesigning, rethinking, all those things. Socially interactive, that's a great thing to have. It's not always possible if you're a single child or you're just playing by yourself on the weekend, but when you're social, you do share ideas and that exchange starts other magic happening. And then lastly, actively engaged. So not just being physical when you play, but it's getting the cognition of your brain going, and it's also hands-on, minds-on at the same time. That's the best way to learn through play. 5 characteristics that working in Lego gave me that completely different view on things, and I use that every single day in the work we do, designing experiences and stuff.
I guess I should say it's not a prerequisite for getting a job at Lego, because loads of people are quite young, but certainly we're both dads, and so it's quite a humbling experience. Certainly, for me, if you start to enter into this institution, which has literally more rabbit holes and more depth than you can ever exhaust yourself with. And I think it's quite a thing when you sort of begin to reflect on your own childhoods, becoming a father, but then also you start to go broader and think, I still have my own little bubble, and of course there's variations in culture, class, financial circumstances, sort of dispositions and heritage, all these sorts of things are very, very different and very nuanced. And so I guess I'm not trying to say that play isn't universal, because I agree that it is. But are there things where you find yourself actually having to, as someone who's lived in a different country for an extended period of time, are there some things where you think, I have, if you like, the Bible of Lego, but I've got to translate certain things for it to resonate with a different culture?
Yeah, well, I definitely think, and I don't work in the commercial side at the Lego Group, but I do know that they're obviously very culturally aware of how markets are different. For us, it's more about going into a different culture or a different part of society, a different demographic, and understanding how to pitch the agenda that we're talking about here, because there are differences in hierarchy of needs. For example, you're not going to go into a very poor area of a major city and assume that they've all got Lego bricks at home, for example. You absolutely wouldn't. So how you talk about, well, you can do this at home, kids. No, it's not always possible, and there might be other aspects that are preventing them from playing at home, which is often the case, sadly. So I think for us, in the work we do, it's more about, it's more societal than like a culture. It's more what that society or that area poses in a way of different experiences and different, not challenges, but adaptations that need to be made to the experiences we design. Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, one example, this is slightly different, but when I was a teacher, we were a play-based school, and we largely attracted people with that mindset. But depending on the culture, and I'm not going to name any specific cultures, but they were very different in how they saw play as a tool, as in its importance, I guess. Really different, and I think there was a lot of education for the adults. There was a lot of learning for them to go through before they really got on board with the power of play.
I think you're actually touching on something which I wouldn't call it an elephant in the room, but I would call it a very easy assumption to make that actually has a lot of complexity in it. Is that I think, as we grow up, it's not that I'm anti-education. Of course, education teaches us wonderful things that makes for a better society. But I think, if you consider, never mind what I think, but if Ken Robinson's talk is like the most watched TED talk in the world, and he was basically poking the stick at saying, does education, the formal education system rather, kill our creativity? I think to unpick that, I think, yes, it's easy to sort of, should we say, throw teachers under the bus. But I'm sure as you've alluded to, with going into people's homes, going into different demographics, it's not a given that you're going to be raised in an environment that helps with creativity. And I think one of the things, as I've sort of taught various classes on sort of model making and design thinking techniques, I often try to put people at ease and feel less guilty and say, look, creativity isn't like this divine gift. It's a muscle. Despite the fact I've got a gut like a middle-aged spread dad, like in terms of my brain, in terms of like creativity, like I'm at the creativity gym every day. Like I'm like the rock.
I hear you.
And so I feel like you have
absolutely.
to tell people and go, look, it's not that you're stupid, it's not that you're not creative, but you are going to have to be patient with yourself and go easy on yourself, that you need some time to gear up. And I mean, like, I've never run a marathon, but I'm not going to just step out my door and do one tomorrow. You've got to work up to it.
That's totally true.
And so what are the things that I mean, it's a very sensitive thing, but how have you managed to, I mean, let's call it what it is, coach parents to feel, A, not guilty, learn some of the basics, and then actually take real joy in bringing their children on all the things that you mentioned? Like, how do you do it?
Well, and that's a really relevant question for right now, isn't it? With so many families at home. It's like, what is it? 90% of the world's children are currently out of school, which is just, wow, that's incredible. So we've been talking a lot about this. I think before the place we're in at the moment with the pandemic, we were also looking at this. I mean, the most common thing we hear at work is even from colleagues is, I'm not creative, I can't do this. I work in finance. Okay, well, I still don't know. I still haven't heard the reason why you think you're not creative. I mean, you and I know we've all got it in us, and it is a muscle, just as you say. But it's about teasing it out, and as you said, it's about not throwing people in the deep end when we're working with parents or even kids. You don't want to start with a really difficult challenge. You want to start with a low entry, high ceiling creativity challenge, whatever that might be, where everyone can definitely do something, and the opportunities for outcomes is there's no limit. After that, once you've awoken those creativity kind of mindsets, then you can build and start iterating and building. There's that thing called the flow corridor and the flow theory. You want to get people to start their journey through that. I think when you show that to parents, they're like, oh wow, okay, so that's why my child, if a challenge is too difficult compared to their skill level, that's why they disengage. I see. Yeah, and that's why
could you break that down a little bit? Because I think some people might not be familiar with that. But I think it's not just specific to kids and play and Lego bricks. I think you're touching on something which is universal to the way we process information and how we create.
Absolutely. It's something called the flow theory. It's basically the idea that you want to pitch a challenge or something you're doing with a group of people, it needs to be between the right place between your skill level and the challenge level. So if something's not challenging enough compared to your high skills, you're going to get bored. And kids do that very quickly. We do that very quickly as grown-ups. Now, if you have it as a really high challenge and low skills, you're going to get frustrated and give up. So you don't want either of those. You want to be somewhere in the middle, and you want to stay and being in the flow. Everyone probably heard that expression, you're in the flow. That's when you're concentrating. You can't snap out of things. You're just in your own world and you're going for it. That's where we all want to be, and we can all get there. It is about practice. It is about giving yourself the space and time to do that, which is another challenge. But I guess moving on from grown-ups maybe, but how grown-ups, parents can start bringing more play or creativity into the home, especially at the moment. I think once you got the mindset checked and you understand play is important and you're on board with that, it's about allowing the space, creating space for creativity, physical space, time in the day. It's about allowing mess, not being scared of mess. We all know, we're both kindred spirits there. I'm sure we love a bit of mess every now and again. It's a sign of a productive day. It's also about, and this is a big one for parents I worked a lot with, don't be afraid to be silly. Come on. It doesn't matter if you do a silly voice or do a silly dance to engage your children in some learning through play. Don't leave your dignity at the door. I do it every day, as you know, Jude. That's really key, and it holds a lot of us back. We just feel so self-conscious. We become that as we grow older, as we all know. Encouraging free play, a variety of play. I'm sure if we walked into your workshop, we'd see a variety of materials and mediums and tools. Do the same at home. Have a variety of options, not all physical play. But my son loves football. Yeah, okay, that's awesome. But also bring something else in, see how they enjoy that. Go with the flow. I think there's also this idea that you should embrace mistakes. I think that's a really key one, because education's changed a lot since we were younger, and I feel that even you see it in companies now where people are saying, we want you to try things, don't always be worried about making mistakes. I think that applies at home, of course, as well. Create environments where they feel free to test and experiment. I think those are a couple kind of pointers, I guess. Yeah.
And I think I often sort of recommend it to people if I try and find something that they actually can do, but they don't consider sort of high creativity. It's
that's cool.
It's like some people are sort of like, oh yeah, but I can sort of bake, but I couldn't build a model like you could out of cardboard. And you kind of go, well, it doesn't matter. Like, start with what you're good at to build the confidence. And again, I think that's that thing of not having the sort of perfect cupcake, on Instagram. Don't do that to your kids. Dare I say it, you got to look at yourself a little bit if you're still doing that as an adult, which I know is tempting. But it is that thing of I know with my son, let's say we're making a scone or something, or a biscuit, he'll be like, oh, I want to do this, and you look at it and you go, it's totally not going to work, but you're like, I'm going to let him try, I'm going to let him experience. So if he wants to make a wafer thin scone, it's going to go like a piece of rock hard whatever. but I would rather him feel that he has the agency and the autonomy to do that. And I think often those things people don't associate with creativity, but they're actually, if there was like a Maslow's hierarchy of creative needs, like being able to do dumb stuff, like you said, not taking yourself seriously, not worrying about, did I cross the finish line, where were the goalposts? He was just so happy, even though he couldn't eat it. He was just so happy that he'd made this little thing. And even though it's awesome, like dark brown and burnt to a crisp compared to the other ones, it's like, it was his. He really, connected with it. And so...
Love that. Love
I
that.
kind of feel that, it's helpful for parents to sort of sometimes actually just deliberately and consciously go, I'm gonna let this fail. I'm gonna let go, step back. I'm not gonna coach them. I'm not gonna tell them why it won't work. And I think the irony is, you'd think, and when you grow up, that would never happen to you because that sounds condescending. Yet, I know my dad used to work as a stonemason, and I remember I'll try and make the story quick, but basically, he didn't really know how to like chip off this corner of a piece of stone, and he was mortified when he got it wrong. And then the foreman came back to him and said, "Oh, don't worry. Yeah, I knew you were going to do that wrong, but luckily we're going to make that into this thing, so the bit that fell off doesn't matter." But he then proceeded to show him how to do it. And so my dad didn't feel crushed that he had made a mistake, but boy, did he remember how to do it right, because it was framed by
Perfect.
that delta, right? Whereas
Yeah.
if you spend all your life going, this is how to do it, this is how to do it, and you follow your nose, I think one of the things that, we talked a lot about Lego is that you have to have the resilience in your creativity to suddenly fall off a cliff and be like, this isn't going well. It's all
Yeah,
wrong.
absolutely.
So I mean, how
Absolutely.
would you, to sort of hand the mic back to you a bit, how do you think, yes, it's good to say we build creativity, but how do you build that resilience where kids don't shoot themselves down, or they don't shoot each other down, and dare I say adults as well?
Gosh. Well, I guess I've touched on it briefly, but creating the environment where they feel safe and secure to explore. And that sounds like, any home will do in that case. No, no, definitely not. It's not always the case. And any school will do. No, still not the case. So can we also come in and provide those opportunities? That's what we see some of our community events that we do around the world. Can we just give them an hour or 2 hours where they can really explore and not feel held back with fresh people from Lego, never met before. We don't know what their personalities are, what they're good at, what they're not. But so they can really come in and explore their skills. And I think you mentioned resilience in creativity, and I think resilience comes out of creativity tenfold. I mean, the play experience builds resilience like crazy, right? It's because they're failing again and again, and we do a lot of activities where we know the children will fail, as you mentioned earlier with your son. They will fail. It won't be the perfect outcome, but they get up stronger and they develop amazing skills to carry with them. So it's a difficult question to answer, but I think it is about bringing opportunities to the table, safe, secure environments to explore. Yeah.
And I guess one of the interesting things, maybe just sort of, I guess we've been talking a lot about a sort of singular perspective on things. I can't help but feel that when I was at school, things were very much graded by the individual. What grade did I get? How well did I do in a certain test? And I feel like the education system is definitely maturing, that there's, project-based study, there's a lot
Oh
of more
yeah.
emphasis on teamwork. And I mean, that feels for me to, without sounding like everyone's just got to be funneled into employment, but it is a reality, to be able to be good at working with each other. But I would like to think that Lego goes beyond just, should we say, diplomacy in creativity. I think it does actually provoke kids to say, how do I critique something that is still moving everything forward? There's a lot of social cues which are quite nuanced that kids have to get right before they leave. Otherwise, they're like a bull in a china shop when they graduate, right?
Yeah.
They're either too much ego or too little ego. And actually, I think some of the methods in Lego, I mean, if you could expand on a little bit, how you sort of guide people through that.
Well, if I got it correctly, I think we give them the tools to explore real world problems and come up with their solutions or ideas for solving those real world problems. Now, as a child, being asked by an adult to solve an issue around sustainability, for example, something around environmental impact, then I would feel pretty amazing and pretty empowered that a grown-up's asked me to do that, and B, at the end of it, they're going to listen to my idea. And I think that's something, if we really need compassionate, involved, engaged, empowered children more than ever these days. And I think if we get to them in their teens with this whole agenda, it's too late. It's too late. We need to find ways to talk with them and involve them at a much earlier age. And that's where I think the Lego system of play is the perfect tool to do that. We have a program called Build the Change, which I know you know, and it's been going for years, and that's expanding a lot later this year, so watch out for that. But that is about getting children's ideas in front of people that can actually implement change. So I think children have a louder voice than ever now with various people in the environmental movement. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. She's awesome. Yep. But you know, there's that's one person, but there's so many other voices, and I think play is one way to activate those ideas. And I say play, I mean Dyson, companies like that. When you're in R&D part of any company, they're playing when they're coming up with new ideas.
Oh, yeah.
It's play. Yeah, you know that firsthand. It's play, and yeah, I'm going a little off track here, but I think you know what I mean. I think we just provide them with that tool, involve them in the conversation. That's important.
So I guess it's one of those weird, you know, there's so many things we could keep waxing lyrical about the importance of play, creativity, open-ended play, learning through play, all these sorts of great things. Yet it seems odd that when we enter a workplace, it is still sometimes difficult for people to believe in the business case. And it's not that I want to answer the question for you, but it is a tough thing between saying that businesses are inherently results orientated, and quite often the way we gear the mechanics of our business is by, say, you know, if it's fashion, it's quarterly cycles of fashion. If it's you know, a big company, it's maybe operating on sort of Christmases and holidays, or it could be any other sort of cadence. But either way, it's quite often under a year. And sometimes you're working on stuff which is like way, you know, there isn't this finish line where you go, how did we do? 9.6 out of 10. You know, there isn't that. So what have been your learnings, both in Lego where you feel comfortable to talk about, and obviously we've got to respect confidentiality, so it might edit some of the answers, but how do you feel, given that you interact with so many diverse organizations, where have they looked to you to say, can you help us understand how we can truly integrate this deeper into our business? Because all the journals, all the academic studies, everything, you know, Clay Christensen, all these people always say creativity is going to pay dividends in the long run for your business, and yet we still struggle to do it in the short term.
Absolutely, and we are a business at the end of the day, and there's that's always, in our team, that's always in the back of our minds. But we really look for shared value. I mean, that's a big term these days, and I think there's just, once you join a company like Lego with such a strong culture based around play and its impact, I think we're, you know, the majority of people get it. And they understand why we're doing it. So there's never really a question, so to speak, around, you know, should this be what we're doing? That's a given. We have the foundation as well, and the leadership is there to obviously look at the area. But when you start looking at individuals and teams and play in their days, you know, I mentioned finance earlier. They're always the example people give. If you're creative in finance, you have to be careful because you can get arrested. I'm not suggesting creative finance is the solution.
Creative accounting has been...
That's right. That's right. But you know, there is a drive within the Lego group to find ways we can be playful in our day and actually walk the talk. And, you know, that's a golden egg. If you do find the solution, that is a golden egg. We're working towards it. There's a difficulty because everyone's got things they've got to do. You've got KPIs. You are results driven. You've got to report to your boss. You've got to do that. Now, for us, for many people, it's about integrating play into what you're doing already. For many people, that's very difficult to do because it takes so much thinking and planning, and there's not that spontaneity. So we're working out ways to actually integrate it more and to be playful in what might be considered mundane tasks. How do you make Excel playful? That's a challenge. But I mean, typically you will stop what you're doing, play, and then come back and continue. Now, that play is not, I'm not suggesting that's not valuable, because you will come back to your work refreshed. Different synapses will be firing. You'll perhaps look at things differently, come up with cooler solutions. But how can you bring that in more? And I don't have the answer to that. And that's, we've discussed this a lot. That's something I think a lot of companies are looking for. Creativity is valued by the Lego Group in a big way. And the companies I've worked with in various forms have all, you've just seen a massive shift in businesses around the world and countries too. I mean, you're seeing China is super involved in building their creative kind of capabilities and capacity, which is really exciting. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm afraid I don't have the exact answer.
Well, I guess maybe we could take a sort of another direction of your obvious other love, which is music. And I guess that takes the pertinence away from, is it a Lego thing or not? But I think one of the things, certainly, as you know, I worked as a technology scout and direction designer, which I often described as, it's easy to go out and say, look at this shiny, cool bit of technology. But the direction design was saying, how should a company integrate it in a meaningful way that is, desirable, feasible, and viable? In other words, is it awesome, but are we going to make some money off this? And does it make sense to do in terms of all the business process? And does it fit with the brand? But it feels like one of my observations, and I felt I picked this up from some really good mentors in even when I interned as a student in California. They were really big on saying, if you've come up to a new experience, then of course the scientists and the experts are great, but it's also really helpful to hand it over to the artists. And that is not to say that scientists aren't artistic and artists don't use scientific method, because they do. I'm going to get onto that in a minute. But I feel that actually when you're trying to answer sort of how do we be more creative in an organization, I think sometimes if you think we've got nothing to learn from kids playing with bricks, look at other industries that you consider which are incredibly creative, like music. And I think that is how you balance the commercial and the creative. Would you agree? Could you expand a bit on how you've sort of gone through that with music? Because you've done that. You've been in a band.
I think have I succeeded in being creative? I guess I've created something from nothing. So it's very personal. I think the creative process when you're creating art, and it's very difficult to reflect on. It's almost like you need a consultant to sit next to you and observe how you're doing and give you a report back. But I do see. I see all the things I've talked about today: the environment, feeling secure, feeling that you're in a safe space to explore. That's the only way I can create. I can't sit on a busy tube carriage and start creating. I have to be here. I have to be around my instruments, my ukulele, my various guitars. That's an interesting question. Really interesting. It's a tough one.
But I think that's often where you hear the phrase of sort of creative culture in a company. is that it's both, it's very easy to put a figure on what is the cost of that room because it has
Yeah.
electricity and it has desks and furniture and etc. But to say whether it has a good vibe and a good energy, that's really, really hard to put on a spreadsheet.
Very, very
And
difficult to measure.
and
Yeah.
yet at the same time, we all know when we're in a place where you go, I don't know, I mean, when I went to Creative Play Lab in Denmark, I was just like, oh yeah, the whatever it is, I'm not a spiritual person, but I'm like definitely still someone who gets the goose pimples if I know this is an amazing energy. Which
It's
and so I think, what have you learned about cultivating that energy, be it through music, be it through personal life, be it through professional life? What are some of the things you feel this is always
wow.
going to work well?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I think for me, the excitement and the energy comes from bringing people on a journey with you, a creative journey with you. And if you're in a business, that's about rallying troops around a really cool initial idea and seeing where you can take it. If you're a musician, it's about taking a little seed of a melody and exploring, expanding on that. The energy inside of, if I speak for my work at the Lego Group, it's also it's really unique. It's kind of like when you go to someone in a colleague, you start talking about an idea, and immediately you're just on the same plane and you're trying to get to the same goal. Ultimately, for us, it's about impacting children in a positive way, getting play to them, and it's a really interesting. There are barriers. You talk about assessing the return on investment. Traditionally, that's what businesses looked at. For us, it's more the impact on investment. So that's the barrier. How are we going to impact people? How many can we impact by doing this? So we have very different barriers, but the energy is very different in the Lego Group. It's a very positive but challenging vibe, and we have the space to be playful and creative, and that makes all the difference.
And I think you mentioned a really important thing is like the space, but also I think you were strongly hinting at time. I remember at Dyson, I mean, I was, as always you come out of university and think you solve everything.
Yeah.
But I remember it's an odd thing, and I guess you must know this as a musician. You either get really good at picking up signals, or you get good at giving off signals. And I think it's not to say that you have to be at one end of the spectrum or the other, but I think it's fair to say it's good to sort of have a bit of introspection of which are you. Are you
That's
are you the
interesting.
person who's good at reeling other creative people in who are maybe a bit more quiet and reserved, or are you good at spotting someone you should go? I guess it's like a band, right? Quite often, I mean, there's exceptions to the rule, like Phil Collins or something, where it's the drummer, but a lot of the times it is the front person who's like the driving, in quotes, charisma. But then they would be nothing without the whole
Without the
experience
sum
put
of
together.
parts. I totally agree, and I think that's where you and I are very similar, and we tend to, us types of people, I guess, tend to find each other in organisations, and because we're, I guess, in the traditional sense, networkers, but not networking for ourselves, more about connecting and creating these communities of people that can drive for good. And that's very much how I felt we worked together in Lego, and in our chats and explorations, but also outside of work. People are involved in so many different things, and I think there are certain people that really get energized by bringing people together. I'm definitely one of them. I know you are too. But I think that's a really amazing. I'm not bigging us up here. I'm saying there are many other skills you need in a business, but businesses, organizations, whatever you are, non-profit, for-profit, you need people that can do that and bring people together and get things going. Yeah, that's really exciting. I love that. I love when you see two people connecting and then it just becomes this crazy beast.
Yeah, I think crazy beast is the word, and I guess maybe that's the bit where also if you know you're at that end of the spectrum, I guess this is almost coming back to finance in that I'm sure. I guess it's without sort of getting too personal here, and feel free to ignore the question. But I guess a lot of people, when you're in the early stage of dating, you're like, what do we have immediately in common? And I'd say the like emphasis on immediately.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
same music, or you like, I don't know, both like comics, or you both like poetry, or whatever it is, sports. And then I felt, and again, I'm not trying to be overly revealing or offend anyone here, but as you mature a little bit, you realize that, I guess for me, I mean, I'm lifting from the Japanese yin and yang thing here, of that there's that interesting thing where you go, yes, we have certain fundaments and sort of ethos, which is the same, but actually that other person approaches it from an entirely different perspective. And indeed, some of my weaknesses are their strengths and vice versa. And you could certainly say that's true in musicians. I think most people would relate and go, yeah, I see how the Beatles, those were four very different people, yet it worked. At least for a significant amount of time, it worked. But I think, interestingly, within an organisation, if you are one of these networky people, I feel I go out of my way to go, great, I need some energy. Of course, I need some kindred spirits, but I desperately need some people who maybe do process better than me, do finance better, have better business acumen and experience. So without bringing you all the way back down, how do you sort of begin to open kids' eyes that are they too young for that penny to drop? Or is there something where you can start to hint and allude to, should we say, a higher level of creativity where you have the humility to absorb, conflicting ideas and different disciplines?
Yeah, I think if you look at some of the programs around some of the coding stuff we do, there are project-based initiatives where children have to find their strengths and fit into a group and work out what they're doing. I mean, it's similar to there's this thing called Lego-based therapy, which is not ours. It's designed by a professor over in the States, and that is a process for children on the autism spectrum where they are given specific roles in a creative or building process. Now, having watched children in creative situations for many years now, it's very quick. They're very. It's kind of innate to them who can do what, who's going to kind of lead. Just like us, we very quickly pick up that guy's leading this group. I'm standing back, and kids do that too. I mean, it can be difficult if you have two leaders, of course, but that's where the emotional side, the emotional development comes in, because the emotional regulation, that skill has to be really developed, and it's through those kind of experiences that happens. So it's an interesting one. I think I would say that it's there in primary school. They're definitely flexing those muscles, but once they get to bigger group work, things like working with mindstorms and things like that, that's when you see different skills, like this guy's good at that, this guy's good at that, this guy's good at that. Yeah, that's interesting. Tough one.
But I mean, it's funny because it's sort of, as I said, I'm sure you must feel this as a parent. You start to see, I don't know whether you occasionally come home and your kid complains about something and you go, if I replace just a couple of the words like toys with budget, or playing house with launching a product, you're like, oh yeah, it sounds exactly the same as my professional level gripe. And so some days I feel extremely unevolved when you play it back and you go, oh yeah, I am actually being oversensitive, or you think I am worrying about the small stuff, or sometimes you get into that moment where you forget to sort of the phrase I remember from an old boss was endow people with positive thoughts. as in try to give them benefit of the doubt, assume that even if they're doing something which looks really like it's trying to get in your way, try and imagine that they're only doing that because they want the same end goal.
Yeah.
And I think Lego has a very strong culture of that. Of we've both been in situations where, we're the bouncing ping pong ball in the room, and someone's trying to tell us the truth about why something can't be overcome if we don't get that right. And I think there's a bit of to and fro. We have to shut up occasionally and listen, but I think there's also should we say, a gentle request to the people in those situations, which is spelling it out that I will only let you do your crazy thing if you can get through this hole, and there's criteria to get through that hole. But if you do, then actually I'll back you. And I found that, people are always down on like legal and finance, but actually if you sort of say, just humor me, what would allow me to do this? What would I have to do? And then they go, oh, well, you're listening now, so let me tell you. And I think I've often found that that's an interesting dynamic, whereas usually people like you and me, we think that by adding more layers of icing on the cake, it makes it a better experience. And they're sometimes there to go, no, I just want one layer of icing and I need you to do this as well, and you're like,
yeah.
We're now on the same wavelength. And I think I've often come away from that with some of like the best business relationships are people who are wildly different to me. And it's so satisfying when you learn new rhythm. And I'm sure it must be the same to almost go back to music, right? When you're like, I could never imagine of like jamming with that person, and then you click,
Yeah. No, it's awesome. It's awesome. No, I love that. I've seen that especially this year with working with new people, people that are very good at things that I'm not good at. And that's perfect. That's what you need. Otherwise, life would be very boring and frustrating.
So I guess, taking a step back from this, I kind of feel one of the things maybe it'd be interesting to break down a little bit is what have been your reflections on, we often use this big heavy professional phrase of corporate social responsibility, but essentially it's about how can companies do good in the community and in the world. But of course at the end of the day it's still down to people. And so I guess, what have been your observations of some of the ways that even when we're going through our hardest times as individuals, we still find the empathy, the resources, or the resolve to do things for other people?
We work in a very, very lucky position where the impact is very clear. Excuse me. We work with play, we work with children. The joy, the learning is pretty visible. And putting that in front of people and saying, do you want to be part of this, is a real privilege. It's quite a treat to have it that tangible. So I think within the Lego group, we're in a lucky place because we kind of create impact just by being who we are. And getting these, even if I look at the commercial side, getting bricks out to children, sets, whatever they're playing with, they're still having a play experience at home, and that's positive. That's a positive impact. Excuse me. If I look at other companies that I've perhaps worked with, where it's less tangible, then motivating people around that is very different. It's very different. Most people want to help people, help others in need. But how do you do that in a way that's meaningful? Going back to the play characteristics, how do you make sure that it's meaningful for the people that are involved? In the Lego group, it's very meaningful because that's what we do. That's our core values. But if you're in, say, automotive, how do you make it core to the business? How do you make it core to the product and tie it into employees that way? It's very different. It can be done. But for example, working in engineering firms, getting people to go out and help teenagers engineer a Formula One car, for example, or a Formula car, not a Formula One. That's meaningful to both sides. If you don't have that, it makes things very challenging. So I feel that we're very lucky in the Lego group to have that very obvious impact. It's not easy, but it's there and you can see it.
And I think that's often the tricky thing, isn't it? That I think one of the things, maybe we should just point that out, even though it feels intuitive and obvious to us, is that sometimes fragmenting an organization can sound like a negative thing, but actually it's really quite powerful at Lego that it has distinct facets. Of course, the Lego group is of course about sort of changing kids' life for the better, but it because of its profits, it frees foundation up to do things which is not, you're not about a KPI generated with profit, and instead your work is obviously about impact rather than necessarily a financial metric. So it's about how many children did you reach, how many families, how many countries did you bring change to. So I think it's quite interesting, and I mean you mentioned Formula Student. I always think that's sort of sometimes a little known observation, that quite a lot of your everyday saloon car usually has technology which starts off at Formula One. And it's odd because people think, how is it that Formula One spends that much money? And you go, because it's making the money off the mass product, and that comes back round. Because it, as much as the sponsors do pay a lot of money for Formula One, it isn't the thing that ultimately sustains it. If you look at any of the big companies like McLaren or, sort of VW, they're selling stuff to everything and anyone. And it's got nothing to do in should we say, direct connection. And so I think that's often an interesting thing, that Lego has managed to sort of be both psychological and philosophical for companies that need that, as you said, with creativity. They need space, they need time, they need culture. And then what's great is that because they can then package it in a way that they can be communicated to the, business orientated divisions, then they're able to go, well, thank you, we can now take this and rapidly execute.
That's it. You're bringing it close to the core business. And, that's the whole thing, the last 10 years, the whole thing with corporate responsibility is it can't be add-on. You can't add something to a business that doesn't isn't core. Any business can go out and paint fences for in a park or a school, or plant some trees. Anyone can do that. I'm not saying they're bad things. They're not. We need to do both those things. But if you want to find a way that embeds responsibility, sustainability into your culture, it has to be core to the business. It has to be just what you do. If you look at Novo Nordisk, the company that create a lot of medicine for diabetes, they are creating impact through what they do. Yes, they're for profit, but we will miss them if they're gone. And I think that's something that we feel we aspire to. Like we want to be a company that people would miss if we weren't around anymore. And that's, sad as that sounds, that's driving us, and that's making us want to be better and better every year. We're very lucky to have the brick and all the positivity it brings. Other companies don't have their brick. They have to find it, and but it's there. It's just it's a challenge. It's a real challenge, but it's the way everything's moving in that area. Yeah.
But it's a fascinating journey, as I said. That thing of simultaneously being obsessed with the brick, but then also being able to go holistic on it. I think that requires a lot of sort of creative agility, frankly, with that. So
it does. It does.
I guess it's one of those things as well. I think it's been pretty extraordinary, just talking through this journey with you, and thank you so much for just bearing with me in the I didn't want it to feel like an interrogation, but I think part of the pleasure of this sort of creative process is being that keep asking the whys and drilling down to why a company like Lego is so extraordinary. And I think you've managed to shed some real light on things, I'm sure, for the people listening to this. So it's been incredible talking.
Thanks, Jude.
Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure, Jude. Great connecting again. And thanks for all the wonderful questions. Stay creative,
Absolutely.
stay playful.
And indeed, if there's anything, as I've said this to a few people, I feel there's something to be said for using the benefit of this medium and technology, is that I know you and me always end up going away thinking, oh, I wish I'd said that. So we shall avail of that. And if there's anything you'd like to include in the comments and the links, we'll add that as well.
Amazing.
But I'll definitely put some resources to
Great, I'll send you some
to
stuff
how
over,
you do
definitely.
it, and also a little bit of the philosophy, because I think there's just some incredible stuff
Awesome.
that, couldn't be more relevant now. So thanks again, David.
No worries. Thanks, Jude. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.